In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast following a huge Toronto victory 30-27 over the Montreal Alouettes. JB, joining me as always. This was a... let me start that again. This is so awkward. All right. Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast following a huge Toronto victory 30-27 over the Montreal Alouettes. Ben Grant along with JB as always. JB, this was a massive win for the Argos. They were so depleted, so many guys injured for this game, and yet they were able to pull out a win against the very team that they're going to be, competing with for that its second, third spot, potentially first spot, depending on what happens with Hamilton. Massive win, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic win. They were outperformed in every statistical category except the one that matters, and they were desperately injured at almost every position, and they did what they had to do to win at home. And I think it proves that they are, probably in the top three teams in the league, and have a decent shot at finishing first in the East.
So I want to take issue with you saying that they were outperformed in every category. Mm-hmm. Statistically, there's no denying that. Vernon Adams threw for 382 yards. William Stanback ran for 133 yards on 19 carries. And in fact, the Alouettes backfield, every rusher averaged over 7 yards a carry. So I can't argue with the numbers, but I feel like that was part of the plan. And I don't know if this is Chris Jones or if this is Dinwiddie's strategy going into this game. A lot of stuff obviously is carried over from Coach Young, this being Coach Jones's first game as I guess, interim DC or whatever we want to call him. But the plan was to let Stanback run and to let Adams throw anything he wants as long as it's underneath. So when you look at the Argos coverage in this game, the defensive backs were playing about 10, 15 yards off, whether it's man or zone. They were giving him whatever he wanted underneath, gambling on the fact that at some point he's going to want to go downfield. He wasn't just going to be happy hitting those underneath routes all game and handing it off to Stanback. At some point he would go downfield and the Argos would intercept it. And it worked. Yes, they let up a lot of yardage, but that's kind of what happened to Montreal last week. They had a ton of yards last week, but they all resulted in 6 field goals. They couldn't get into the end zone. So I actually really like that as a defensive strategy. I don't care that they had all these yards.
Yes, you could argue they played bend but don't break, and they did. I think I don't think your plan can ever be to give up 575 yards and think that you're going to win. I think, usually you would want to stop either the run or the pass. You might give up one. That's not a sustainable model to give up that many yards and expect to win. But they were able to pull it off. I think they were smart with Adams to bait him into the deep throws. And Stanback looked awesome. I thought he was the best player that the Argos have faced, and I thought Montreal should have used him more. I know he carried it 19 times for 133, but man, I would have kept going to him. I thought I wasn't in love with the Montreal play call in terms of what I thought the Montreal, not to go on about Montreal, I thought that little underneath sort of tight end reverse was a great call down in the red zone. They were killing the Argos on screens early. I did not like Montreal's play calling in the second half.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I was talking about that with the guys up in the press box. We were looking at that opening drive that Montreal put together. they were running all over the Argos. They were basically averaging like 11 yards a carry those first few runs. And then suddenly they threw 3 passes in a row and then had to punt. And everyone's like, well, what are you doing? Like, you're running all over the Argos. Why don't you just keep running the football? And that continued the whole game, no matter what. And it's not like the score got way out of hand. Like, I could understand, abandoning the run if they were, 3 or 4 touchdowns down. But that was never the case. They were always within striking distance in this game. And so why they decided they absolutely needed to throw the ball was beyond me. Because the Argos, and this is a whole separate topic, but the Argos are more banged up right now than I think I've seen any team in the CFL in like the last 10 years. If you look at the injured Argos, there is an all-star team, a CFL, basically the 2019 all-star team is on the injured list. You've got both starting linebackers in Mwamba and Judge. You've got offensive linemen. You've got 3 of the 5 starting receivers on the injured list. You've got the backup quarterback in there, the backup halfback and corner. And so, of course, there's going to be weaknesses on defense, but I have no idea why Montreal didn't just stick with that. You've got this great player in William Stanback. Run the football. I don't think the Argos had an answer for that.
No, they definitely did not. Like, we talk about bend but don't break, but I don't think the defensive line and linebackers were pretending to get washed out. They were as well they should. I mean, they're not the starters, and they had a hard time. I mean, they were getting dominated. They were getting pushed out of the way. Thank God. Thank God for Montreal.
The decision making was so strange, and not to say anything bad about Dexter McCoy and Diggs. I thought, both those guys, they're great linebackers, but their strength isn't in stopping the run. Diggs really isn't a middle linebacker, and that's where he was, and you could see the difference.
Yeah,
Mwamba is such a good run stopper.
Stanback's a load.
Oh yeah,
I mean, you could just see it. I mean, you're not going to bring in the secondary to stop that guy. You need bangers to bring him down. So I think that was a real. I remember watching and thinking, okay, this is going to be a problem. But they just did not stay with it and didn't give him enough breaks. I thought, if you're getting that kind of space for him, I don't know why you don't bring in a second back to give him a blow and still keep going. It's basically when they took him out, they passed. And that's one way of running an offense.
Or not running an offense.
Yeah, it was certainly helpful from a defensive point of view.
Yeah, it was great. I was thrilled every time they dropped back to pass. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, they'd be like, run, stand back, take a break. You might as well just yell pass as soon as they ran on the field.
They just sort of figured that, knowing the type of quarterback that Vernon Adams is, he loves those deep shots because it's what he does so well. And so they were prepared to give him whatever he wanted under 15 yards, let's say, and let Stanback run. And Adams, for the most part, was really patient in this game. Like, he finished 30 of 39, like 77% completion, that's got to be one of the highest he's ever finished a game with. Because he was patient. 382 yards. Like, his fantasy performance was astonishingly good. And yet, at some point, he decided he needed to take a shot downfield. He made some poor throws and threw 2 picks.
And I thought they underused him, rushing.
Yeah, I get that. Like, he ended up carrying for 5 carries, 38 yards. Again, 7.6 per carry, so they were productive. But I think most of it came out of that 25-yard run that he had, which, it was a design draw play right to, at the beginning of the third quarter. I think it was might have been the second or third play of the third quarter, where they realized that the Argos are playing so deep and paying attention to Stanback that they basically swung Stanback out in a swing pass pattern. And ran a draw play with Vernon Adams, and there was nobody left, and so he ran for miles. But then they didn't go back to that. That was a great play. I thought at the time, like, what a great adjustment this is. And then, well, that's it. Let's move on to other things. And that was the problem with Montreal's play calling today. It was weird.
It was weird. I don't know. Anyways, yeah, they they certainly have the talent, but full credit to the Argo defense. Even though they gave up a ton of yards, when they needed to make a play, they were able to get off the field.
And what else do you do? Like, as the Argos defense, like as Coach Jones, you look at your depleted defensive line. You have no linebackers left. Your secondary is depleted. Like, they've got guys in at every level. There's somebody who was like cut during training camp who is now starting for you, and yet they were able to put together a really good game. But this is the only way you can do it. You can't play aggressively with these guys. You have to play bend but don't break, and just hope that Montreal gets frustrated, which they did. I thought it was a really good game plan. And I know, like you say, like they obviously didn't go into it saying, hey, let's give up 500 yards of offense. That's not, they don't word the plan that way. But bend but don't break was, I think, the perfect answer for what the threats that Montreal posed. Let's talk about some of the individual performances. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, coming in as technically the backup quarterback, and I know Coach Dinwiddie likes to say he has two starting quarterbacks. I think he's got a pretty good argument after today. McLeod played an amazing game, especially that first half. He struggled in the second half, but he really didn't make a mistake in that first half.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he played well. I thought he did exactly what you want your backup to do. That you want your backup in a perfect situation to not be a donkey, and so like he came in and he had a great first half and he moved the ball, and his arm strength is still there. He threw some gorgeous deep outs and deep balls, and he didn't light himself on fire in the second half. But I thought he played very well, but it definitely did not create a quarterback controversy for me. I thought that he played well as a backup, but that's still not the package I would like to see moving forward.
In talking to him after the game, he was disappointed with his second half, but it was kind of interesting. He was surprised at the looks that he was given from Montreal, because we talked about how much differently Montreal has played him over the years. They usually send a lot of heat from the secondary. That's just sort of their staple with him. And I know defensive coordinators have changed since Montreal last played Toronto, but it was a really different look today. And what McLeod Bethel-Thompson did was basically anytime Montreal was in zone, he was looking for the easy completion. He was just taking the underneath stuff. And then whenever they played man, that's when he would take a shot. And he was able to capitalize in both of his last two drives of the first half. I know Pipkin was on the field when they scored that touchdown, but it was McLeod Bethel-Thompson that got them there. And then, of course, with just a few seconds left in the half, he's got man coverage on Chandler Worthy, who claims, and I won't dispute this, but claims to be the fastest man in the CFL. And I'll get to that in a second. But finds him in man coverage, throws a bomb, and I think there were 9 seconds left when they scored that. And that, to me, was a dagger, because at that point, it puts Toronto up 21-10 going into the half. They've got all sorts of momentum. They've scored 2 touchdowns in like 45 seconds. But I think a lot of this comes on, McLeod Bethel-Thompson's really stellar play. He was an intelligent quarterback. He took what was there, took chances when there really was no risk, and used his feet well, bought himself some more time, and just didn't make any bad throws, any poor decisions. And that's, more than what you would expect of a backup quarterback.
Well, I think it's what you expect from a good backup quarterback. I think my point was just he didn't do anything I haven't seen him do before, and I think that's one of the great things about the Argos, that they have probably the best backup quarterback in the league. So I was really happy to see him, do what he does, which is cannon that ball down the field. And Worthy is, we can talk about the wide receiver depth. He looks like a guy who's going to take the top off defenses, as long as the deep ball can get there. So that's a nice addition. And Pipkin is our short yardage quarterback that we've been clamoring for.
The problem is when Nick Arbuckle comes back, and I expect him to start the next game after the bye week, you're going to have Macbeth as the backup quarterback. And because of this weird CFL rule that is now in place, you're not going to end up with 3. And so you're back to just Arbuckle and McLeod. And it's unfortunate because Pipkin looked amazing in that role today. He was comfortably throwing the ball around. He was 2 for 3 for 34 yards. He ran the ball well. He was a threat on third down. And you talked about it last week, the idea of having somebody really competent running the football on third and short. And he's the answer. He's the guy. And yet I feel like the next time the Argos take the field, he's not going to be dressed.
No, I don't know how they get around that. I mean, maybe they call him a wide receiver.
I don't know what kind of liberties you can take with that, but it would be great to have him dressed as well. I feel like it's worth it. I feel like the Argos actually need to dress 3 quarterbacks and find a way to get it done. I don't know how you go about doing that and who sits and how that works, but I thought it was amazing that you had Antonio Pipkin to turn to, not only in short yardage. Sometimes they used him on first down just as a change of pace guy, just to see, how Montreal would play him. And they usually went against the trend on first and 10. I believe he threw a pass. So
well, especially if Arbuckle is dealing with some injuries, I think the less you have him smashing into mounds of people, the better.
And maybe it's a situation coming out of the bye where you've got 2 games in just a few days' time. I think it goes Wednesday and Monday. I think that's the split, Ottawa and then Hamilton. Maybe you give Arbuckle an extra day's rest. Maybe you don't play Nick Arbuckle in that Wednesday game and he goes out for the Hamilton game. I think he's, like you said, there's no question, he is still the starter. He is the best quarterback on this roster.
Well, maybe you have a promotion and you let a fan start the Wednesday game.
It's Ottawa, so anything goes, I guess. Let's talk a little bit about Chandler Worthy. So 4 targets, 4 completions, 85 yards, and a touchdown. It was great to see a fast wide receiver out there taking the top off, like you said.
Yeah, and I thought his touchdown catch was not an easy catch. He wasn't just a guy who has raw speed. I thought that was a well brought in ball. He wasn't quite there, and I was really impressed with him bringing that ball in. I thought he looked great on another deep out where Macbeth showed off his arm. He's a receiver. He's not just a punt returner who can blaze flies. I thought he looked like a real receiver, which is I think. A real weapon. I think when everybody comes back, he should be one of their starting 5 receivers.
Or at least used as a rotational piece, a guy that's in there every so often. I think something that still needs to improve in his game is his route running. But McLeod Bethel-Thompson said after the game, like those two have a great relationship together. They are friends socially. They've been to each other's houses, met each other's families, everything else. But McLeod was saying that a few weeks ago, when he wasn't even on the roster, he asked McLeod to meet him at a soccer field downtown Toronto. He, since getting cut, he stayed in Toronto and still kept working on football. And he's out there throwing passes, catching passes with McLeod Bethel-Thompson out on the soccer field on an off day, just trying to do whatever he could to stay fit and to stay ready, hoping that one day this opportunity would come, and it did, and he made the most of it. And that's awesome.
I don't even think he needs to work on his route running that much. In that, you want to look at NFL comp and you look at Tyreek Hill. What does that guy run? He runs flies. He runs wheels out of the backfield. He runs deep overs. That's it. And we have so many guys who can run routes beautifully, but are not outrunning anybody. I I'm fine, man. Let Worthy go out there and run that, run that straight 9 down the field, run the deep over. I wouldn't sweat that at all. I don't need him to be a tactician. We've that position is currently filled by like 5 guys.
I would like to see him add a really good comeback route to his repertoire, because he's going to get so much cushion the more he gets on the field. And if he can run a really good comeback, I think that just opens up so many possibilities there. But it's interesting what you said about having so many guys that aren't Chandler worthy. Coach Dinwiddie after the game said something interesting in that he doesn't usually favor that style of receiver. He tends to lean towards larger, big physical receivers who can really help in the run game. And he commented on the fact that he's got a few guys that don't really fit that mold. And I think this has maybe been a good thing for him. I think in some ways, the injuries that have been suffered for the Argos, while, overall they're not good. Certainly we miss Juwan Brescison. There's no question about that. You miss Eric Rogers. But while these guys are great receivers and really good run blockers, I think having Coach Dinwiddie see what you can do with guys like Damien Jean-Pierre and Chandler Worthy was really eye-opening, because he was clearly impressed with their play. And I think his philosophy going forward may be slightly different from what it was maybe coming into this season. Let's talk a little bit about Chandler Worthy's speed, because in the press conference, I asked him if there was any Argonaut that could stay with him in a 40-yard race. And he said that not only was he the fastest Argonaut, he was the fastest man in the CFL. And everybody jumped all over that. I didn't mean to start this big thing, but McLeod Bethel-Thompson backed him. He said, I would bet on him in a race. And Justin Dunk from 3 Down Nation was asking him specifically, like, if you raced Speedy Banks, Lucky Whitehead, would you win that race? And he said, yeah, absolutely. If they're willing to race, I'll do it. He is fast. He has recorded a 4.2640. I don't know if anyone else in the CFL has posted a 40 time like that. But what a great weapon to have on the Argonauts, a guy that can blaze like that. I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think that's the takeaway from the game, is that Worthy is not just a returner, but is one of their top 5 wide receivers.
And how about Damien Jean-Pierre today?
Yeah.
4 targets, 4 receptions, 91 yards. He leads the Argos in receiving yardage today. You look at that breakdown, the top 3 receivers today: Jeanpiere, Worthy, Gittins Jr. You got Ricky Collins with 1 catch for 3 yards, Devaris Daniels with 1 catch for 4 yards. If you had told me before the game the stats of Ricky Collins Jr. and Devaris Daniels, I would have assumed that the Argonauts got absolutely annihilated. But good on Jeanpiere for stepping up. Worthy we've talked about enough, but amazing play.
I always thought he looked great at practice.
He does.
Like fast and smooth, and so it doesn't surprise me at all that he went out there and looked like a starting wide receiver. The Argos depth is really coming through. Like, we talked about how it was probably the second best roster in the league when the season started, and I think that's true, because with the amount of injuries they have, to be in first in the East is I think a tribute to how many guys they have who can still play ball. I mean, everybody on this team is still way better than who was on the team 2 years ago. And we're like 3-4 on the depth chart at a bunch of positions.
I think Jeanpiere has the potential to really turn into something. He's a small school guy. I think he went to Nicholls State. I apologize if I'm wrong on that, but I think it was Nicholls State. And, not a guy that anyone had heard about, not a guy that came in with a lot of fanfare like some of the other players that we've seen in this past couple of years. But he's done everything that was asked of him. He, as you say, he looks great in practice, and he finally got his shot. And he actually found out today that he was going to be playing in the game. He wasn't supposed to be dressed. But this morning, Eric Rogers testing out his hamstrings, like, I don't think I can go. And so he gets this sort of late scratch. Damien Jean-Pierre is notified this morning that, hey, you're dressing tonight, and he goes out there and has 91 yards receiving. So that's his shot. Now, how do you go, just like we talked about with McLeod Bethel-Thompson, how do you now take that guy off the field? How do you take Chandler Worthy off the field? These guys aren't both going to be dressed against Ottawa, I don't think. They're going to be guys coming back.
Well, I love his speed. I think that's going to be a tough decision. If they go out and do, if they go out and flash again in the Ottawa game, that's, I think there's going to be some guys who are not. Well, I mean, we talked about. I don't know what the trade market is, but if they were to look for a trade, I think wide receiver is a position that a position of strength that we could trade from.
There's no question about that. And I think you could almost add defensive back to that mix if some of the guys start coming back. Obviously, they're playing pretty shorthanded right now, but depending on the status of guys like Jeff Richards and Daniels, you've got a couple guys that have been out for, well, Daniels for an extended time, Richards just this game, but you saw Tristan Deku go in there and it was pretty seamless. He was asked to do some different things, but Arjun Cahoon out there, I feel comfortable with Matt Boateng out there. He didn't really get playing time today, but they're so deep at so many different positions. And you think of like the 10 defensive linemen that this team has lost, and yet still you've got Sean Oakman out there making plays. You've got Charleston Hughes out there making plays, and yet there's all these guys waiting to come back. If this team can ever get healthy, and maybe this bye week is going to do it for them, man, there's going to be some amazing battles and some crazy roster decisions you've got to make. Who do you start if this whole team's healthy?
I'm calling it right now. There's a wide receiver trade in the next 2 weeks.
But who do you even trade for? Like, what's this team short of right now?
Well, I would trade for another defensive back with CFL experience. I think we
get defensive backs coming out of our ears.
I know you say that, but I would like to have one more safety. If I were to choose, I don't think it's absolutely pressing, but I think if you can't start 9 wide receivers, so you can keep the depth, and that's great in case somebody gets injured. But if somebody's looking to add a wide receiver and they're willing to give up something, I think it's worth having a conversation.
I agree, but I think the only thing you might trade for would be offensive line, and I don't think there's any team.
That's
the thing.
You saw what happens when you trade for an offense. Nobody's trading you an offensive lineman who's good.
Right. That's the problem. So I don't know. I actually don't think there's going to be a move. I think this is who we're going to war with, and I think this is the roster that they're going to finish the season with. I just think there's going to be some really tough decisions. But, the nature of football, there aren't any more bye weeks after this week. We're at the halfway point of the season. There's 7 games left. There are going to be injuries. There are going to be guys that need rest, that need a break. And so, maybe the right move is not to do anything, because maybe you will need these guys. Because here we are in Game 7 needing Damien Jean-Pierre, needing Chandler Worthy, needing Curly Gittens Jr. because of all the injuries that the Argos have faced.
Here's a question. What is going on with Tavares Daniels?
In terms of his play, like he had one catch today for 4 yards. He almost had another catch, but, he's in a pretty tough position.
He was supposed to be a primary target. I just don't know what's going on there.
He's being covered by the best defensive back every week, and that's the nature of his assignment. And I think what he's doing is he's taking attention away from other guys. Like you look at the lineup today. If you're Montreal, if you're game planning for Montreal, and you look, okay, who are they throwing out there? Damien Jean-Pierre, who's that guy? Chandler Worthy, what? Gittens Jr. from Laurier. Like, of course you're going to pay extra attention to Tavares Daniels from Notre Dame, this guy that has torn up the CFL. Like, he was the only player on the field that had any sort of reputation. So of course they're going to, shade coverage to his side, but that opens up everyone else. And the few big games he's had happen to be when you've got other people healthy, when you've got Ricky Collins Jr. making plays and Eric Rogers making plays, and that's when Tavares can go out there and really, make a statement for you. And, that touchdown that we saw against Hamilton, where he's left in man coverage, but it just doesn't happen a lot. And a day like today, his job is basically, take up coverage. And if you're going to shade the safety to his side of the field, that's fine. We'll go to Jeanpiere, we'll go to Worthy, we'll go to Gittins Jr. And that's what Bethel-Thompson did. So I'm okay with that. I don't care if Tavares catches another pass all year, as long as it's freeing up these other guys. Like you say, they've got a wealth of receivers. Use them. That's fine. Eat up coverage with Daniels.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. But, I mean, it's fine. It's not my money. But at the end of the day, your one's got to be your one. Like, ones are ones, like ones aren't running around the league being decoys.
Let's talk about our offensive player and defensive player of the game today. So I'll lead it off. For offensive player, I'm going to give it to McLeod Bethel-Thompson. I think for technically a backup quarterback to come in here, and I know the way his stats ended up weren't quite what they looked at halftime. He finished the game 13 of 19, which is 68% completion for 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I thought he played a really smart game. I thought his pre-snap decisions, he had a lot of check with me's where he's got 2 play calls and he's going to decide which one to go with. I thought they were great. I thought his RPOs were great. I thought he had amazing feet in the pocket. He bought himself some more time in man coverage to find a guy downfield. And he played really smart. When they were playing zone, he just took what the defense gave him. And when they were in man, especially when the defensive backs had their back to him, that's when he would take a shot. And so full credit to him. I think he's my offensive player of the game.
He played well. He played a very good first half, and he played within himself. And I think that he played, and this is not a criticism, I think he played like a backup, which is great, which is you're not a gunslinger. You're not out there. You're not the starter. You're out there to do your job and to not light things on fire. And I thought that's exactly how he played, more conservatively than he used to play as a starter.
Well, in 2019, we saw him try to do everything himself. And he's just got so much more talent around him now that he realized
and I think
he didn't
feel
need
that
to.
way as the starter. Like, it's just a different kind of mindset. So I thought, I was happy. For me, I'm going to go with Damien Jean-Pierre. I thought what a tribute to his preparation that, look, there, you hear stories about guys who don't know any of the plays, from when you watch football enough. And here's a guy who was not expected to start, could easily have been like not into his playbook, not totally dialed in. He goes up practice, but he's not sweating it. And then when he gets this last second call, man, he is ready to roll. He knows the plays, he knows the routes. He's not the lights aren't too bright. I think what he did was spectacular tonight to go from not being on the game day roster to being the star of the offense. That to me was fantastic.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. So, either he or Macbeth or Chandler Worthy, 3 guys that played amazing games today. Let's talk about defensive player of the game. I think we're probably going to end up with the same one here because there was one guy that really stood out. I'm going with Shaquille Richardson. He had a forced fumble. He had an interception. He was in on a number of tackles. They sent him in on halfback blitzes. I thought he played an outstanding game. So he stands out for me in a defense that, didn't really have that many highlights. He was the one guy that was making them.
Yeah, I thought it was his best game of the season. I thought Chris Edwards played really well again. Obviously, I'm a huge Chris Edwards fan, so I thought he played really well. I thought my guy, the CN Power, played really well. It had maybe a turning point sack that turned 7 into 3. So he was and one of the few times they rushed him from the outside, and like, man, he's holding that defensive line together. Like, no shade to Feeney and whatever other guys they have coming in, but I mean, God love him and Charleston Hughes, man. Those guys are taping it up every week and are going out there and trying to hold the line. So all those guys, I thought played well, but for sure, Shaq deserves player of the game. I thought he really flashed all game.
For anyone at home wondering, and it's not your fault if you were, JB referring to CN Power, this is his own nickname for Sean Oakman that he throws around like everybody knows that you just call him CN Power. But yes, that's who he's referring to. It's not a bad nickname. It's just that you are the only one using it right now.
Well, that's okay. It's only for me.
Best play and worst play. For the best play of the game, I don't know if you're going to have a different one. For me, I think it's pretty obvious that it's the touchdown to Chandler Worthy. It's late in the first half. Montreal gambles. They try and go downfield. Adams gets picked. And here you've got I think there were 23 seconds to try and get a score. And so everyone's like, oh yeah, just get into field goal range. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, he sees man coverage on the fastest guy in the CFL. And he just unloads a perfect pass. It was a beautiful ball. And Worthy made an excellent catch. Just gets into the end zone. And what a high to end on. And knowing especially that Montreal's getting the ball to start the second half, that puts them up 2 scores. I thought that, to me, was the best play and the biggest play of the game. What about you?
That was good. I mean, I know as an offensive guy, you sort of brushed past the pick that gave your offensive guys a short field that you managed not to screw up. But I'm going to go back to the pick and my guy Chris Edwards. I thought the pick was when the game shifted for me. Is what they were looking for from Adams. And I thought that pick, right after they had scored, and full credit to the offense for cashing that in, but I thought that was a huge moment for the team to go, you go down there, you score a touchdown, they get the ball back, and then you pick it off them. That's a great kind of psychological way of wearing down your opponent. We're going to score touchdowns on you all day. I thought it was a huge pick. I thought that was, for me, the play of the game.
And I think that in that situation, Montreal's probably thinking, well, there's not enough time left for Toronto to do anything with this. So let's take some chances and see if we can get into field goal range, not knowing that Macbeth and Worthy were going to hook up for that amazing score. But yeah, it was a great swing, and it was such a nice pick from Chris Edwards too. And it was exactly what they were hoping for. By playing that really soft coverage, everyone sort of, planted back at depth. You're able to come forward, and Edwards did. He saw that ball thrown and undercut it, made a great pick.
I think Shaq almost had a pick six too.
Oh, he did. He was so close to it.
You know what? When I saw it on replay, he wasn't quite as close because Adams actually really put a bit of gas on it, but maybe a step or two. And I thought that was a great moment too. That could have fulfilled my hope for a pick six. So another shout out to Shaq there.
Yeah, he saw that play coming, but as you say, I think Adams also saw Shaq and put some heat on that ball. But I think everyone that I was sitting around at the time, there was this gasp as that ball was thrown because you could see it.
At first blush, it definitely looked like, oh. But yeah, that thing was cooking.
Now, where do you go for worst play of the game? I was having trouble with this one. For me, I'll give you my worst play of the game, but I'm not thrilled with it because it just seems kind of a cop-out. But mine is the Chandler Worthy fumble on a punt return. And the reason that I have that is not so much in Chandler Worthy fumbling, because I think that's what you get when you put a dynamic returner back there, is that sometimes there are going to be mistakes. Sometimes they're going to field a punt that they maybe shouldn't have fielded. Sometimes they're going to, try and get those extra yards that they shouldn't try and get. I think when you put a guy like Chandler Worthy back there, you accept that you're not playing it safe. This is not Braverman back there.
No,
who's
you're
going
right.
to catch the ball and go for 4 yards.
Yep.
But So I'm actually okay with the occasional turnover that you're going to get there.
Yeah,
But in a game that didn't have any glaring mistakes, to me, I guess that's the worst play of the game.
I mean, it's for sure, coachable film, because when you look at it, of course, when you're coaching returners, when you feel contact, you have to immediately go into ball protection because, you're not fighting for a first down. Stop fighting for another yard. There's nothing to be gained. The play is over. So that, I know that's antithetical to this belief that you can always take it to the house. So that'll be a bit of a shift because, as a return, you got to have a little braverman in you. But I thought the worst play, I thought there was a swing pass to DJ Foster that made me gasp at its terribleness.
That technically went into the books as a run because I believe it was a backwards pass.
I couldn't see on the TV feed, but I assume that the quads were supposed to block, but it looked like a training camp. Here's how you tackle in space drill.
I think 3 guys missed their blocks on that, and that's why that looked like that.
I thought that probably the worst play was the final drive that they gave up to Montreal, and the two passes, the 49-yard and then the 29. I thought the touchdown. I know they were up 10, but that was really easy. That touchdown. I thought that was a bit of a letdown for the secondary, and I thought he was really wide open in the end zone. So I would have hoped in a prevent defense to not have somebody behind you with a minute left. So that, for me, that was the worst play of the game. I thought giving up that touchdown, not only did it screw up my score prediction, which was almost perfect, but it put the game in jeopardy.
It's crazy how still to this point, after all the crazy CFL comebacks we've seen, you don't have more intensity from the defense with under a minute left. Because like we saw, Montreal got the ball back. They were, a few yards away from maybe attempting a field goal or maybe a few seconds away.
Well, they did not have there definitely was not a Montreal clock runner. Like, no, game's over.
I know.
You're like,
there's no review
over?
or anything. I know.
Game's over. No, you didn't get out of bounds in time. Like, okay.
I was fine with it, but yeah, everyone was kind of waiting around. Like even the teams, they didn't really go out and shake hands like they usually do. They're kind of waiting. Like, are you going to review the clock?
Ref waved. It's like, no, that's it. Game's over. Good try.
Fine with me. Well, that will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. We're excited going to this bye week because we've got all sorts of cool things coming at you. Make sure you check everything out that we've got on xsandargos.com. And if you've got a minute, please rate, review, subscribe to our podcast so it shows up right there on your phone. For JB, my name is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.
Together, fight the foe, foe, foe.